presentation.
Yeah, so that article's got links to some research papers on what is coming out and kind of the idea. And we all heard this, how January birthdays tend to have more high-level hockey players in it. Many reasons to that: better coaching, more physical development, which allows you to get into more high-performance tracks. But a lot of times, particularly in soccer, you'll see players that get cut at age 14, 15, and then go on to be pretty much the best player of their generation. So a classic example here is Declan Rice, cut at age 14, joined a different academy, and then by age 17 was already a regular starter for a team at the highest level. Had 3 years of being the young player of the year, and an England international at age 20, and probably their best midfielder now at age 21. Maybe he's 22 now, but he's fantastic. And there's many to that where maybe didn't have the physical abilities and maturity yet from that standpoint. The relative age effect is just the fact that you're the oldest in your age group, which at the youngest of ages is, a high percentage of development. And as I have a 1-year-old at home, I can tell you, the difference between him at the beginning of the year versus the end of the year is pretty massive. He's going from 4 pounds and change to now he's well over 20. Huge, massive gap there. So idea of just maybe do some bio banding, some ideas around that, and just some studies looking into what may predict future success, which is a lot more around do the kids have competitiveness? Do they have self-efficacy, which would be the ability to produce a desired or intended result, and then just expecting some success before it's actually achieved. On the opposite side, factors that were found to be negative predictors of future success is fear of failure, body anxiety, and just disrupted concentration, so the inability to concentrate and push through, which actually kind of drives down to personality drives everything. And I don't know about you guys, but I've always found that the best players that I've been able to coach or be around in some capacity tend to have some level of stubbornness to them, bar none. Like there's no getting around that fact. And it's just a matter of how do they manage it. So if I'm looking for maybe someone to take a bet on, I'm actually looking for a little bit of stubbornness, a little bit of maybe some grumpiness in there. Clearly we don't want it to go to the extreme, but it definitely helps push through to that next level of performance, and having that ability to have the success and stick with the process that will lead to that. So I do want to mention, coming back, since we're talking about farming and that quite a bit, is coaching is like farming. Like you just because you yell at the crops doesn't mean that they're going to grow faster. It's about the environment you create for the crops to grow. And something I did want to bring up, and I had notes on, just something that I wanted to touch on in this call at some point of, coaches coach the environment. You provide the love and the care, the respect, and show what's possible, give ideas. I look at John Wooden, like what was his coaching? It was someone did a research study. It was always between 2 to 20 seconds. And it was just like, yeah, have you thought about trying this? What do you think about this? Those types of kind of feedback and comments. And then for us, like, how do we create better learners? Like athletic learning is such a concept. And Jordan, you probably have a good insight to this working in the school. And I don't know if any of you else have worked directly with students all day and learners, but just the capability of the ones that are able to learn well versus the ones that don't, and helping bridge the gap or push them to a higher level of ability to pick up information, knowledge, and in our case, translate that to an athletic performance, is a massive difference. I had 2 years ago, 2 kids walk in the door. Both had played like house hockey. And I was like, okay, both have the athletic base to grow and have success. I'm curious what's going to happen. One player's probably going to be our captain this year, growing like a weed, turned into a fantastic player. And one was just stagnant the whole time. And the only explanation I can get is just the one kid is an excellent learner, while the other one struggles, one with some maturity issues, but two doesn't have the focus, the ability to push through, doesn't have that stubbornness when things get hard, doesn't really push through as much, or just like this kid just goes and shoots pucks and thinks that's enough. Those types of things. So the idea of how do we create better learners is definitely something I've been exploring for a few years now, and definitely something I'm working towards getting better implementing. Because I want to be effective as a coach, but also there's the other person on the other side. How do I help them be their own best coach, own best leaders, own best growers, learners, etc.
Jordan, how do we create better learners?
That's a good one, Greg. Just so you know, both Wally and Tom taught for a lot of years in schools. Both were excellent phys ed educators, in from everything all accounts I hear. The how do you create better learners is, I think it comes back to awareness, and I think it's awareness on all counts, meaning awareness of the learner themselves in how they learn, and the modalities in which they prefer to learn, as well as the educator or the coach in this piece, in understanding if you have 20 players, you have 20 individuals. So you need to get down to understanding each of those individuals and how you learn best. When you talk about a player that's maybe a little bit resistant to change, or a little more hard-headed, you have to understand that, how you can open up them to being more receptive to what you're saying. And sometimes, like I'll use the example of working with humans, in that I have had a head building operator in a school that his first answer to me asking him to do something was always no. And I learned that the no didn't mean that no, he wasn't going to do it. The no meant that he needed time to think about why you're asking him to do it and what was the why behind it. And I think that's the big thing with learners today, is they're more aware of things, and they want to know the why first. It used to be that was one of the fun things about working with female athletes, is they always needed the why, and as soon as they had the why, they would do anything for you. Whereas male athletes, they would try what you asked them to do once, maybe twice, and if it didn't seem to work for them, well, they were back to their old ways. Now it seems that both want to know the why, and usually if they can get that why piece, then they will go with it. So I like what you're asking. How do we create better learners? And that's something that I think that we need to ask ourselves when we're heading to the rink every time, to work with our players and that. And I think that it goes back to, again, getting to know them. One of the things that I've done it's not mine, again, another thing I've stolen that's turned out to be a good idea, was a season opener survey. And the two things that I ask the players in that survey, one is, how do you prefer to learn? Because, as I said, most students are far more cognizant of their own learning style, whether they prefer everything visual, or lots of hands-on kinesthetic, or whether it's auditory and they can learn from hearing it. But then the other piece that I ask is, how do you prefer your feedback? Because that's the other piece. The feedback is reinforcing that learning piece. So I said, outside of you asking me to yell at you, I said that because that's a modality of teaching that I don't use. I will not be yelling at you to motivate you. Beyond that, I said, I can provide feedback how you like, because some, they want feedback immediate, some don't want the feedback in the moment, and they want it after. And so it's working with them to understand those pieces. But I know Tom there, and Wally, Peter, you guys probably have other things to add in there. And then Greg, I just have one more question with you in your research on seeking out talent. Where I'm just going to ask you to respond to this after the other guys have added on this topic, but where do you see the patience in waiting for late bloomers? and the importance of finding those late bloomers. But Peter, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, good morning, Jordan. I love the idea of everyone of understanding that your players are different. So my going back probably last time, because people are probably tired of hearing about farms, but my history is in horticulture, and I think that actually was one of the things that has helped me over the years as a coach and developing as a coach, because each plant needs a different environment in order to flourish. So some need a little bit more space to grow. Some can grow in tighter, more confined areas. Some need more fertilizer, some need less, some need more water, some need less, some need more sun, some need more shade. So getting to know what your individual players need as a form of motivation is first and foremost and key to being a successful coach. There's not a blanket, hey, my way or the highway, right? Again, that was something, but that's incredibly archaic, and you're not doing kids any favors if that's your method of how you're coaching today. So getting to know them as individuals, understanding their situations, and to me over the years, and I think you guys are probably on the same page, it certainly made coaching more fun. It certainly made it much more interesting and allowed me as a coach and as a person to grow. So that's something that a byproduct, I think, of what the sport of hockey has done for me anyway. But yeah, to your point, individuals, how do we reach each different individual? And again, I had plants that in a year, perfect, ready to go, saleable crop. I had other plants 3 to 5 years before they were ready. So everyone also develops at their different pace. So having all that, having patience and being able to learn who needs what, difficult, 100%, but really a heck of a lot of fun once you really get into it.
Jordan, you had a question for Craig, but I know it relates to the question I want to bring Tom in on. And it relates to Tom, that girl that was born December 31st. And what you're going through with her now coming into her second year at U13 hockey. Can you talk to that? And then Jordan, we'll get back to the question you threw at Craig.
Well, I had a girl last year. She was born like the 30th, December 30th. So she's 2 days away from being a peewee, right, at U13. But she was the biggest girl on the team, had good skills, everything, but just total panic when she got the puck. It was like a hand grenade. And she was at our summer camp and she looked really good, because now she's playing with, she's the same age as basically the first years, but she's had that experience. But that's really tough if like you're talking, you're really a lot younger. I was lucky because when I played, the date was August 1st. I was born in October. So I was in the first 3 months of that. And I was really small. And in the school system, it was a little different because it was January 1st. So I was in both those situations. And when you're way smaller than everybody, you have to be way better to be able to play anything. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how she does this year. That she's a little older, because she's quite big. And I want to make a point about how you evaluate players. I played a lot of hockey with Bob Murdoch after we were old guys, and he coached. He was coach of the year of the NHL, coached a lot in Europe and all that. And he told me the one stat that he paid attention to, he had this done. Every time you touch the puck, you get a plus or a minus. And if your team basically is at 65%, you have a really good chance of winning the game. If they're at 70%, you're probably winning big. And if your team's at 60%, you're losing big. And he said and then you can do it to individual players. You keep stats. So we did that when I was helping coach the University of Calgary men. And then I would do that in the Red Bulls for the pro teams when I was watching. I'd keep some games, I kept that stat. And it's a really, really valid stat. And it's the same thing with evaluating a player. If that player, you know, the same thing is if the play dies on their stick every time, you know, they're not helping you very much. And it really shows, you know, it shows what you have to work on in practice too, and who needs to work on what is that stat. I remember we were playing the Western Final, and our top scorer, we were playing Babcock's team. And our top scorer could hardly touch the puck. Like he was, you know, he only had a couple of stats there, and we talked to him and said, geez, you're not involved in the game here, Jason. And he picked it up and played, you know, pretty good after that. So it's a really valid stat. The person taking it has to know the game as well. But I wanted to just throw that in as a thing. And another thing I heard that I thought was really interesting is they went the greatest players. They went over a whole bunch of games. Gretzky, Lemieux, and all the top players played. And Lemieux and all of the guys like Lidstrom and all these kind of guys, they made about 4 passes into the slot a game, you know, that created scoring chances. And Gretzky averaged 11. And nobody, like, he was almost triple the next highest guy as far as getting the puck and putting it on somebody's stick in a scoring area. So that, you know, it causes the question, how do we as coaches improve that skill in players? So those are 2 points I wanted to make there.
Jordan, I wonder if you could bring up that question you were directing at Craig, and we get Craig back into the flow.
Sure. It was just a quick question, Greg, on your research into evaluating prospects and players, and then I guess the value of looking for late bloomers.
Yeah. So, I mean, late bloomers, there's twofold to this. So one is like, for example, say you're, we'll use soccer because there's a direct all the way to the first team. There's no drafts or anything like that. So like there's an incentive to keep these players that you think are promising. They may not be performing at the highest level today versus some of these kids, maybe they should be playing AA rather than AAA, and that's just the right level for them. But we're not writing off the players. I got to remember the country it was. I want to say it was Finland, but they were tracking kids that were in their national camp at 15 and 16 versus them being in the camp at even 18 and 19 towards like World Juniors. And it was like 6 kids were the same. The rest of the roster completely turned over. Like it was a very small percentage as you went through the puberty ages and beyond of what actually led to performances. Everyone started equaling out to their physical maxes or in that direction. So for some coaches, it's the right decision. Yeah, the kid's a late physical bloomer. Do they need the challenge? Do they what is the proper place for them? And the second piece would just be like, if you're in a club where you've got a professional team all the way down to youth academies, of which players do you want to keep around as potential for that? Going back to that Declan Rice example, even in his first year at the academy, the new one he got into, literally the academy director took a stand because everyone else is like, well, he's just physically behind, like he's not keeping up with the group. And that guy stood out and said, no, we're keeping the kid. And then 2 years later, he's starting for them, you know, in the most valuable, the best soccer league in the entire world. So there's the different ecosystems, like for me, when I think about that goes into it. And then following up on learning styles, I like this, the second piece about feedbacks. I find that's the biggest variance. I'd love to see some research and just like what's a good timing of feedback, because I found the same with like some kids, you want to give it to them immediately because otherwise they're going to completely forget about it. other kids, they're rethinking back on the stuff and you can still have a conversation on it. So the timing of that is right. But from all the research that I've looked at, all the guys I talked to with USA Hockey, there's no such thing as like a learning style. So I'd be curious to dive in further on that. I can't find anything that validates it other than it sounds like a consultant may have come up with it and now it's stuck into a lot of school systems. I could be wrong on this, but as I've tried to dive down that rabbit hole, I'm finding a lot of dead ends, finding it being a thing. But I definitely think the feedback piece, there's a lot to that. And then the second I just want to follow up is we talk a lot about from our importance as a coaches and helping. I'm just thinking about like if you threw a kid in an environment and you just gave them skills, like what is a good learner? What does it look like? And just being able to equip the kids with those skills that we're not there. We're not helping them at all. They're just thrown in the deep end. Because I find whenever I bring up the conversation, it often ends up being on us as teachers, which I understand and get. And that's immediately where our head's going to go is like, what am I going to do? But I'm saying if we completely remove ourselves, like what does a good learner look like? And how do we help kids get to become better learners? Like, for example, something I try to do with my kids is a feel through. Like if you're going to go do a physical skill, like do a feel through while you're in line. Like, what does it look like you're about to do? Like, what are you about to ask your body? Like feel through that. And that is a good way for them to pick up the reps quicker, is to mentally go through that rep of what it's going to feel like physically before they actually physically go through the rep.
Just what you said about feel through. There was a couple of Canadian groups, I think the volleyball girls that advanced, they talked about their visualization, literally thinking about what the heck they were doing and seeing it. And I think that's something that, Jordan, you've played with a little, we all have over time, but it's a tool. Jordan, as Craig was talking, whenever he gets into learning and learning styles and research, I wonder what you were thinking about that, the idea of learning styles and how it applies in education in terms of what teachers are doing and could do better or differently.
Well, going back and Greg, this learning modalities goes back, first kind of came in, I would say, in the 90s. I've been, by the color of my hair, I've been in education for quite a while. So it was something that a lot of research was done back in the 90s, and the modalities of it, the three main were kinesthetic, meaning hands-on, visual for visual learning, and then auditory for those that could learn from what they hear. There has been research done on it since then, and what they're finding is that there are preferential ones, but what they're finding is that most people learn in a blend. But what it was focusing in on those different things. But one of the biggest things to do with it that came out of the research that probably is the most important piece isn't just those three modalities. The most important piece is that the brain research was that we'll learn in modality that isn't our preferred for probably about 12 minutes. So the importance was needing to change up lessons about every 12 minutes or so. So you're doing something different so that you're not just all sit and get, because if you sit and listen to a lecture, it will probably start to turn into Charlie Brown's teacher around that 10 to 12 minute mark if you're not actively taking notes, or if you're not engaged in asking questions or those sorts of things. So that's kind of where that research piece went. It's ever evolving with the brain research and pieces that are going in now, but it's just being aware of all of those modalities and those sorts of things. I think helps a bit. I know that Tom, with his lesson plan, practice planning, he includes a video on his site with every description that he has, and I think that helps to understand the diagrams and those sorts of pieces as well. So all of those sorts of things, just being aware of